Order, order. Question is Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. I call Minister Adams to answer the substantive question 1 from Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deportations, removals and returns are a Home Office lead. The Home Office is responsible for ensuring that action is in compliance with the relevant legal frameworks. The Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary meet regularly to discuss international business, and FCDO ministers periodically discuss FCDO support for returns flights to specific countries with Home Office colleagues. Most recently, the resumption of return flights to Nigeria and Ghana following a pause due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The UK's international legal obligations, including under international human rights law, underpin all these exchanges.
We now go to Leeds with Richard Bergen. Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Julian Assange case is just one of the many recent cases that have led to greater public discussion on the issue of extradition between the US and UK in recent years. There are concerns across this House about our country's extradition treaty with the USA. One is that the US can request extradition in circumstances Britain cannot, something the Prime Minister labelled unbalanced earlier this year. Another is that provisions within this treaty are not properly upheld. For example, the treaty bans extradition for political offences. What is the Minister doing to ensure that the ban on extradition for political offences is always upheld?
Well, as the honourable member may already know, that changes were made under the previous government to make the system more balanced. I can tell the honourable member the FCDO is committed to uphold the full range of rights set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also in international human rights treaties to which we are a state party.
We now have a substantive to Minister Adams too. Question 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We strongly condemn the murder of Mr. Mahbub Khan and other recently apparently religiously motivated killings of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. On the 8th of November, my ministerial colleague Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, the Minister for South Asia and the Commonwealth, publicly condemned the murder of Mr. Khan, and on 16th of November he raised concerns about killings of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, including Mr. Khan's murder, with the Pakistan's Human Rights Minister.
Let's head to Scotland with Margaret Farrier. Margaret Farrier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response. Given that 4 Ahmadi Muslims have been murdered on grounds of faith in the past 4 months, the latest being 31-year-old Dr. Tahir Ahmed, murdered at home in Punjab just last Friday, can I ask the Minister what further representations his department can make to the government of Pakistan on the issue to end its state-sponsored persecution of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, which is rooted in federal laws that explicitly target Ahmadi Muslims?
I thank the honourable lady for her question, and she may be aware that we had a very robust debate highlighting this issue last night at the adjournment. We remain deeply concerned by reports of discrimination and the violence against any religious communities in Pakistan, including the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We raise this regularly at senior level with Pakistan about our concerns about the mistreatment of Ahmadiyyas and other religious communities. And on the 3rd of November, FCDO officials in Islamabad met with representatives from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Rabwa to engage with their concerns, as well as raising this with the Pakistani authorities.
3 is withdrawn, so the substantive to the Secretary Raab is number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will take questions 3 and 4 together. We send our warmest congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris on winning the election. Whether it's on trade, security or defence, we do more together than any other 2 countries, and we see huge opportunities in the months ahead.
Let's head to Scotland with Neil Gray. Neil Gray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As President-elect Biden embarks on building his internationally focused team, including Antony Blinken as Secretary of State, who said Joe Biden would bring aid back to the centre of foreign policy, does the Foreign Secretary regret that this UK government's disgraceful plans to change the law to cut aid spending below 0.7% not only sends the wrong message to the rest of the world, but gets the relationship with the new administration they did not want to see off to a bad start.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, we consistently showed that we are a leading, if not one of the leading countries on aid. That will continue. We've also, of course, which will matter to the United States, indicated the increase in defence spending, which shows what a dependable ally we are. And all of the soundings that we've had, that I've had with the incoming leadership, showing that there are huge opportunities on climate change, on COVID, to strengthen the relationship even further.
So the Secretary, Lisa Nandy, first of two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I echo his congratulations to President Biden and, in particular, the historic election of the Vice President-elect? The spectacle of democracy, however, under attack in the United States has sent shockwaves around the globe. Even after the transition announcement yesterday, the President has continued to say he will never concede to fake ballots. Ron Klein says the President has set back the democratic norms of the United States. Does the Foreign Secretary now regret emboldening those who attack democracy by refusing to assert that all votes should be counted and that processes need to play out? Or will he stand with me and the incoming White House Chief of Staff in defence of free and fair elections?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, first of all, I certainly warmly join with her in paying tribute and welcoming the historic election of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Frankly, the stuff that she's said about emboldening critics of the US elections couldn't be further from the truth. What we have said consistently, she might want to listen to the answer to her own question. What we have said consistently is that the US has the checks and balances in place to produce a definitive result. It has. We warmly welcome the new administration. We look forward to working with them.
Global alliances, Mr. Speaker, are based on shared values, democracy, the rule of law, human rights. Human rights will be a key pillar for the Biden administration. They rightly recognise that Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian catastrophe, sustained by US and UK support. The war has gone on for more than 5 years, with a dangerous rocket attack in Jeddah just yesterday. Does he agree with the incoming US Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor and the Ambassador to the UN that it is time to end participation in or any form of support for the disastrous Saudi-led campaign? And will he now commit to playing the UK's part by ending arms sales to Saudi Arabia?
Well, I certainly agree with the Honourable Lady that we've got to pursue every effort to get peace in Yemen, both on the humanitarian side, but also on the political track. That's why we've been fully supportive of the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths. I've been out to Saudi to encourage, to promote and to cajole the Saudis into doing the right thing. Of course, the Houthis need to move. Actually, the most important thing is a concerted regional push for a political end to this wretched conflict.
We have a substantive question to Secretary Raab, 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 7. Beijing's imposition of new rules to disqualify elected legislators constitutes a clear breach of the UK-China joint declaration. This is only the third time we've judged a breach, the second in 6 months. China has once again broken its promises and undermined Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy.
Let's go to South Wales with Geraint Davies. Geraint Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Foreign Secretary has just said, the Chinese government has breached the Sino-joint declaration twice in the past 6 months. So when will he implement the Magnitsky sanctions against the chief executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam? And what steps is he taking to tighten capital flows into China via Hong Kong from the City of London?
Well, can I thank him for his interest? He will know that we've already made a new offer to B&O, suspended our extradition treaty with Hong Kong, extended our arms embargo on mainland China to Hong Kong. On the Magnitsky sanctions, what I would just say to him is that it's not just something that we can decide at our fiat. We need the evidence to back it up. We're assessing that, working with our international partners. And of course, on the 18th of November, I led and issued a statement with our Five Eyes foreign ministers condemning the latest China move in relation to legislators, and that was hot on the heels in October of 39 countries joining the UK in the UN Third Committee with a statement on Hong Kong as well as Xinjiang.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, as the host of COP26 and the president of G7 next year, securing greater global ambition on climate change is a diplomatic priority for this government. Ministerial colleagues in the FCDO and my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, regularly raise this subject, and he has done so, including with Japan and South Korea earlier this year. And the strategy is working, Mr. Speaker. China has pledged to become a carbon-neutral country by 2060, and Japan and South Korea have committed to become net zero by 2050. On the 7th of November, the PM appointed my right honourable friend, member for Berwick-upon-Tweed, as the International Adaptation and Resilience Champion for COP26.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While my constituents in Barrow-in-Furness have welcomed the government's focus on renewable energy, it's clear that a global approach is required to deal with this crisis. As such, can my right honourable friend reassure the House that the Department's working flat out on COP26 and the Climate Ambition Summit to make it a success?
He is absolutely right that the answer to this lies in global cooperation. The United Kingdom is leading from the front, and we are pressing foreign governments for greater action and higher commitments at the Climate Ambition Summit on the 12th of December. Our posts across the globe have engaged with host governments, businesses and civil society on climate change issues ahead of COP26, and we will continue to do so in the run-up to the Climate Ambition Summit this December.
Contrell Smith, the SNP spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Climate change is going to drive the future crises that humanity is facing. Parts of the world will be getting wetter, parts of the world drier, all of the world more climatically unstable, population growth, resource scarcity. Climate change is going to be at the heart of every crisis we're going to face. Now, the UK is undertaking the integrated review of foreign and defence policy right now. I would be grateful for an assurance from the Minister that climate change will be high within that review, and an assurance also that he'll take good note of the SNP suggestions which we submitted to that review in good faith, because this is something that we all need to work together upon, because climate change is a crisis facing humanity as a whole.
Mr. Speaker, he is right to highlight the fact that climate change is going to be an important factor in the foreign policy of all countries around the world. We recognise that in terms of pressure on food production, on resources, and the potential implications, the potential conflicts that may come about because of that, which is why climate change and our response to it, development and diplomacy will all go hand in hand through the integrated review.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the Minister for that reassurance. I would suggest that you have a read at the SNP submission to the integrated review. There's some very good ideas in there, not least to maintain development at the heart of climate mitigation and to properly fund it. And if I was a minister of a government that stood in a manifesto in December to maintain 0.7%, I would be considering my position were that to be walked back upon. Is he considering his?
I'm very proud of the fact that the United Kingdom is and will remain one of the most generous aid donors in the world, and we have focused relentlessly on ensuring that the work of the United Kingdom government across all departments focuses on addressing the poorest in the world, as well as the implications of climate change.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are very much strengthening our relations with the 10 ASEAN countries. Last month, I had a meeting with the ASEAN Secretary General. I've also met with all ASEAN ambassadors to London. The Foreign Secretary visited Vietnam in September and met with ASEAN foreign ministers. And last week, I was in the Philippines and met with Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Secretary Locsin, amongst others.
I'm taking bottom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister's meeting in the Philippines? He will know that our relationship with the Philippines isn't just on security and defence, but also extends to the 30,000 healthcare workers in this country
who came from the Philippines. So could I press him on the conversations he had with the government in Manila about those 30,000 workers and how we can strengthen the healthcare relationship?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this. Whilst I was in Manila last week, I met with a range of cabinet secretaries, including the Health Secretary, the British Red Cross, as I say, the Foreign Minister. As he will know, there is currently a ban on Filipino nurses leaving the country. They are fantastic, committed health workers, and we're very grateful to the 30,000 of them in the National Health Service. I'm pleased to report that we did manage to secure important progress in this regard, and following the discussions I had with the Health Secretary, the Philippine President has confirmed that he will be lifting the ban, allowing our NHS to recruit these highly skilled and excellent health service workers.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tom Tugundar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome very much my right honourable friend's efforts with ASEAN and certainly his emphasis on the Indo-Pacific. He will have seen, no doubt, the fantastic report by Policy Exchange done by our colleague, the honourable member for, I can't remember exactly where, Claire Coutinho, who has been instrumental in emphasising some of the points in it. Will he agree with me that this tilt towards the Asia-Pacific is absolutely fundamental to defending democracies in the region, to making sure British interests are valued, and to respecting the individual rights of countries that for too long have been pressed by China to come under a different orbit?
I thank the Chairman of the Select Committee for his question. He's absolutely right, and I also applaud the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath, I think. I shan't mention her name, but I very much applaud her work in this regard. Of course, our tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region, I think, as part of the integrated review, is testament to the fact how important we value this part of the world. And there are a number of issues that we will raise with China where we are concerned, in particular issues around the South China Sea. These are conversations we have regularly with China. I made our legal position very clear here at the dispatch box a couple of months ago on that, and our support in that area has been very widely supported by our ASEAN friends.
We have a substantive question to Minister Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is committed to the principle of non-discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and/or gender identity. If passed, the legislation will reserve adoption for married couples, which in Hungary means heterosexual couples. While there would be an avenue for exceptions, adoption would be very difficult for same-sex couples in future, as well as for single people. And our embassy in Budapest's work is closely monitoring discussion of the proposal in the Hungarian Parliament, and will be discussing it with Hungarian officials and civil society actors.
We're heading up to Scotland with Christine Jardine. Christine Jardine.
Good morning. Question number 13, please.
Your question, please.
Thank you. This unacceptable development in Hungary is a very worrying one, and a move towards, as part of a wider movement to define family as a union between male and female, husband and wife and children. Does the Minister agree with me that we have to take every possible opportunity to impress upon the Hungarian government how unacceptable this is to so many people in our communities here in the United Kingdom?
Yeah. We are completely opposed to all forms of discrimination, and we continue to work to uphold the rights and freedoms of LGBT people in all circumstances. We're really concerned that the amendment of Hungary's Registry Act that was passed through by the Hungarian Parliament in May will have an adverse impact on the rights of transgender people, and I raised our concerns about the amendment to Hungary's Registry Act with the Hungarian Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade in April, and I can assure the Honourable Lady that our embassy in Budapest take all appropriate opportunities to discuss the rights of transgender people with senior Hungarian officials and civil society.
We now have a substantive question to Secretary Raab. 14.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission I'll answer questions 14, 15 and 16 together. We're very concerned about the conflict in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, both in terms of the humanitarian impact, but also the risk of spillover and spread to the region.
We now have Lawrence Robertson with his question. Lawrence Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having chaired the all-party group for a long while, I've seen the relative peace that Ethiopia has lived in since 1987. And the last thing that it needs at the moment, following the locusts problem and also COVID, is this situation. Does the Foreign Secretary therefore agree with me that the very best way forward, the only realistic way forward, is to find a peaceful solution to the problems? And will the Foreign Secretary also do everything he can to ensure that aid continues to get to the Tigray people who need it?
Can I thank my honourable friend, pay tribute to the work that he's done in this regard. I share his concern. I spoke to Prime Minister Abiy on the 10th of November. We've made clear that there needs to be a de-escalation of violence, humanitarian access and protection of civilians. Of course, it's also got all sorts of regional implications, which I've also spoken to the Prime Minister of Sudan and the Foreign Ministers of Egypt and South Africa. This will require a regional but also an international effort to secure peace and protect humanitarian, the humanitarian plight there.
15's withdrawn, so we're going to 16 with Stuart C. MacDonald. Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Foreign Secretary has said, this conflict has implications for the whole region, including Somalia, with Ethiopian troops being pulled out of that country to be redeployed to Tigray. Given reports that President Trump also intends to move troops out of Somalia and the threatening presence there of al-Shabaab and Islamic State, what discussions has he had with international partners about ensuring Tigray doesn't end up helping to destabilise Somalia too?
Secretary Raab.
Well, he's absolutely right, and as the previous honourable member made clear, Ethiopia has been a success story, a relative success story lately. And not only is there a real danger for the people of Ethiopia, but there's the risks that he's highlighted of spillover to Sudan, Somalia and Eritrea, which will be very damaging for people in the region, but also for the wider equities we have. As I said, I've spoken to regional leaders. I will speak to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ethiopia soon, and of course we will be engaging with the Americans, and I was in Berlin talking with the E3 and our European colleagues, and we've expressed our concern, and we're doing everything we can to bring peace and a de-escalation of the conflict.
Shadow Minister Stimboat.
Mr. Speaker, war and famine in Ethiopia in the 1980s are seared into the memories of the British people and the world. And yet again, we are on the brink of another tragedy for the people of that wonderful country. Hundreds of civilians hacked to death, tens of thousands of refugees, hundreds of thousands cut off from assistance, women and children caught in the violence between rebels and a government now threatening to shell a city. So can the Foreign Secretary say why it has taken until today for the United Nations Security Council to meet on this? What more are we doing to secure those humanitarian corridors and access for independent human rights monitors? And does he not agree this is just another reason why this would be the wrong time to cut on our 0.7% commitment to humanitarian assistance?
Secretary Raab.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Gentleman? Can I share his horror at some of the reports of the civilian casualties? We take this incredibly seriously, both energetically and actively in the United Nations, but also let me reassure him that UK funding is already helping those in urgent need of assistance. In Ethiopia specifically, the UK funds the World Food Programme, the UNHCR, UNICEF and the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs.
Adam Holloway.
Number 18, sir.
Minister.
The humanitarian situation in Yemen is dire. As my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, warned in September, Yemen has never looked more likely to slide into famine than it does now. Almost 16 million people, 53% of the population, are currently unable to afford food. In response, the UK is rapidly dispersing the £200 million worth of aid commitment this year. We fully support the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths, who is seeking the parties' agreement to proposals for a nationwide ceasefire and formal talks.
Would my right honourable friend give us some indication of the progress of the UN efforts?
Minister.
We strongly support the UN's efforts and we regularly engage with all parties that have an interest in Yemen. On the 18th of October, I spoke to Houthi spokesman Mohammed Abdul Salam about the peace process and the safer oil tanker. On the 6th of October, I spoke with Yemen Foreign Minister about the progress, and on the 17th of September, the Foreign Secretary co-hosted a P5+ ministerial meeting to encourage all parties to engage fully with the proposals that the UN have put forward.
Alex Cunningham.
Number 19, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Our strong relationship with Saudi Arabia allows us to raise human rights concerns at a range of ministerial and diplomatic channels. Ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit, I raised human rights concerns with the Saudi ambassador, including the continued detention of at least 5 women human rights defenders. The UK also signed the UN Human Rights Council joint statement in September calling for the release of all political detainees. We will continue to raise human rights concerns with the Saudi authorities.
While women in Saudi Arabia now have the right to drive, some of those who fought for that basic equality remain behind bars. The UK, as the Minister suggests, is Saudi Arabia's closest European ally. But does the Minister understand why the detention of women human rights defenders by the Saudi Arabian authorities is an important test for our government's commitment to defending human rights? And will he call on them to release these women and all political prisoners immediately?
Minister.
We welcome the improved situation for women in Saudi, and we encourage the Saudis to continue steps in these directions. As I've already said, we do engage on this specific issue at both ministerial and official level, and we will continue to urge the Saudis to go further on this.
Shadow Minister Wayne David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister knows full well that there is a terrible human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, and many people believe the situation is getting worse. Now that the G20 summit has been held, what precisely does the government intend to do to put pressure on the government of Saudi Arabia to release human rights activists, including women's rights activists, who are being held for fighting for freedoms that we in this country take for granted?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I spoke to the Saudi ambassador on this very issue on the 16th of November. And as I say, I think it is important that we recognise when progress has been made. Saudi is embarking on a reform programme. We are seeking to ensure that that goes further and goes faster. But as I've said in response to the previous question, we do engage at ministerial level and at official level to encourage the release of women's human rights defenders.
Angela Riedel.
Number 21, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 21 and 22 together. The UK is committed to rapid, equitable access to safe and effective vaccines through multilateral collaboration. We strongly support the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, or AMC, which is the international initiative to support global equitable access. The UK is the largest bilateral donor to the AMC, committing up to £548 million to help provide vaccines for up to 92 developing countries. The UK also committed £71 million in non-ODA to participate in the COVAX facility for self-financing countries to secure options to vaccines for UK domestic use.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a pandemic, we are only as strong as our weakest link. So is the Minister convinced that even though we are one of the largest donors, we are doing enough to ensure that developing nations have the infrastructure they need to organise a mass rollout of the vaccine?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, a pandemic response is absolutely what we need, and that to tackle this virus, and this needs global collaboration. So the UK, we really strongly support multilateral approaches so that we can meet both the domestic and the global needs, and working also alongside UK deals with individual vaccine developers. And I'm sure, like myself, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady will welcome AstraZeneca's commitment to non-profitable access during the pandemic, and AstraZeneca are estimating that up to 3 billion doses will be available globally by 2021.
Sarah Brittle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question follows on from the Honourable Member to ask what specific steps my right honourable friend is taking to ensure the UK is at the forefront of providing vaccines to vulnerable countries around the world.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I know how interested so many of our members are when it comes to the access to and the distribution of these incredibly important vaccines as part of our COVID-19 response. Our £250 million funding to the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations is helping to develop vaccine candidates that can be scaled up and accessible for developing countries. Our up to £548 million commitment to the COVAX AMC will contribute to the target of supplying 1 billion doses for 92 developing countries in 2021 and vaccinations for up to 500 million people. And we've also worked with the World Bank to secure up to $12 billion in financing to support developing countries' access to COVID-19 vaccines, treatments and tests.
Question number 23, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The UK government has been clear about its political support for the ICJ process, and we continue to urge Myanmar to comply with the Provisional Measures ruling. We're aware of the Netherlands and Canada's intention to intervene and understand they'll take a final decision once the case progresses. We are monitoring the case closely and continue to consider whether a UK intervention would add value to the merits of the case.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that answer. The failure to secure justice and hold the Burmese government and the military in particular sends a dangerous message to other governments that genocide and ethnic cleansing is an acceptable policy tool, and we're seeing that elsewhere in the world. So once again, and I've asked this question time and again to the Minister and the Foreign Secretary, can he say very clearly that the UK government, if he can't today, can he commit to saying so soon, will join that case? British lawyers, very, very eminent British lawyers like Philippe Sands are involved. They are asking for the British government to support it. Otherwise, people will quite rightly ask whether it is a case of the UK government thinking it is taking the stance that it is acceptable to commit acts of genocide towards Muslim minorities.
Minister.
Can I congratulate the Honourable Lady for her work on this issue, alongside my right honourable friend, the former Foreign Secretary, the member for South West Surrey. She's absolutely right. Accountability is vital. The Myanmar military has committed atrocities against the Rohingya and other minorities, but there has been no tangible progress on accountability. We're very clear about our support for the ICJ process. It is putting pressure on Myanmar to protect their Rohingya and work towards genuine accountability. She mentioned genocide. We agree with the UN fact-finding mission that the events of 2017 constitute ethnic cleansing. We're clear that the question of whether genocide took place is a legal determination to be made by a competent court. The ICJ is a competent court, of course, and we welcome its consideration of the issue. And I also look forward to welcoming the Honourable Lady and my right honourable friend to come and discuss these issues in the FCDO shortly.
A substantive question to Minister Cleverly, number 24.
Mr Speaker, the United Kingdom's priority is to reinforce the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a vital part of the international security architecture and to highlight the UK's strong track record across all three pillars of the treaty. Building on the successful 2020 UK-led P5 process, we work to promote transparency between nuclear and non-nuclear states and submit a national report to highlight our achievement in support of the NPT. The UK will also emphasise the important role of peaceful uses of nuclear energy in achieving sustainable development goals.
Let's head to Wales with Beth Winter. Beth Winter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the UK is a signatory to this treaty, would the Minister agree with me that the logical next step would be for the UK to now become a signatory to the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, taking the lead from the First Minister of Wales, who has welcomed this treaty, so that we in the UK can take a lead internationally to create a future throughout the world without nuclear weapons?
Minister.
The UK has reduced by half its nuclear arsenal since the end of the Cold War, but we will not sign or ratify the prohibition of nuclear weapons. We do not believe this treaty brings us any closer to a world without nuclear weapons and will not improve the security environment.
We now have Shadow Minister waiting in Leeds with Fabian Hamilton. Fabian Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hope the Minister will agree with me that the UK must seize the opportunity of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference early next year in order to push multilateral nuclear disarmament back up the global agenda and take the steps necessary to bring about a world free from the threat of nuclear weapons. With major non-signatories such as India and Pakistan still remaining, will the Minister outline how the government plans to encourage those countries and others to commit to signing the treaty?
Minister.
I think everyone in all parts of this House will share the desire to see a world without nuclear weapons. However, we do need to ensure that at no point do we compromise the United Kingdom's defence. We work at the P5 conference of NPT nuclear weapons states that took place in February 2020 to demonstrate our engagement with the wider non-proliferation treaty community. And we will continue to work on our priorities: transparency, the UK national report, disarmament verification, and peaceful uses of nuclear energy.
Simon Baines.
Question 26, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While it remains our intention and our hope to reach agreement with the EU, as a responsible government, we continue to make extensive preparations for a wide range of scenarios. And the FCDO is leading communication campaigns aimed at UK nationals living in the EU and UK travellers to the EU to help ensure they take the actions they need to be ready for the end of the transition period. We've also launched the UK National Support Fund, providing up to £3 million to support the at-risk and hard-to-reach UK nationals who might need additional support to apply for residency in their host EU member states.
Simon Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister say how businesses and organisations in Clwyd South and the rest of the UK can access practical advice and support from the government to ensure that they are ready for the end of the transition period?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is right to ask a question and to be asking questions on behalf of his constituents. And let me point him in the direction of some areas of support. Firstly, the Welsh Government provides an online EU transition portal at www.businesswales.gov.wales, where businesses and organisations can find up-to-date advice from the Welsh Government. It's an online query service and helpline. For the UK as a whole, Mr. Speaker, the best place to start is the gov.uk website, which provides comprehensive and up-to-date advice and includes step-by-step guides in key areas. It perhaps would be of also interest to him, Mr. Speaker, from a business perspective, to know that we continue to make excellent progress in our negotiations for a comprehensive free trade agreement to come into force in 2021, and we've agreed with the EEA EFTA states a continuity deal to ensure that trade flows continue at the end of the year whilst we finalise the more ambitious FTA we are negotiating.
David Hyde.
Thank you, sir. Number 27.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2015, the UK has supported 15.6 million children to gain a decent education. Sadly, due to COVID-19 and at the peak of school closures, 1.6 billion learners were out of education. An estimated 8 million girls are at risk of not returning. And as one of our really key priorities, we are working with countries directly in supporting the efforts of the Global Partnership for Education. Education Cannot Wait, UNICEF and the UNHCR to get girls back to school.
David Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Britain's work, our contribution in ensuring girls' education is one of the most important and proudest parts of our entire work in international development. And how will the Minister ensure that the Global Partnership for Education Conference is a success and that countries around the world continue to step up to the plate on this most essential agenda?
Minister.
Thank you. My right honourable friend makes a really important point, and I know of his continued interest in education, in particular girls' education. And I can assure him that we have established regular senior engagement with the Global Partnership for Education and our Kenyan co-host to ensure a successful replenishment that delivers major funding for girls' education. We will secure significant pledges through bilateral engagement and in global forums from both traditional donors and new partners, and through domestic and global networks, we will build both attention and expectation around this important replenishment.
Let's head up to Yorkshire to Sarah Champion, Chair of the Committee. Sarah Champion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is aware that girls can only benefit from education if we tackle child marriage, FGM and all gender-based violence. NGOs report that funding for GBV programmes are not keeping up with the rise in cases due to COVID-19. In October, the UNFPA stated that funding for prevention and response to GBV remains unacceptably low. So is the UK going to further increase UK ODA for GBV programmes to combat the secondary impacts of COVID-19 on women and girls? Is the money ring-fenced? And will the Minister be challenging the Chancellor's attack on foreign aid, which will undermine all of this work?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady may attempt and try to draw me into the debate on aid, but she will know that I'm not going to speculate on that. But what I will say is that what she does is really emphasise the importance of girls' education. And the UK is a world leader in both our education expertise and our development spend. And as I've said, since 2015, the front bench opposite may mutter, Mr. Speaker, but let's be absolutely clear, the UK has supported 15.6 million children to gain a decent education, and 8 million of those are girls. And our country direct programmes, research and funding to organisations such as the Global Partnership for Education and Education Cannot Wait make the UK a global leader in promoting girls' education.
Right, we've got a substantive question from Andy Carter to the Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. The government welcomed the news of the 10th of November peace deal agreed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I spoke to the Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Bayramov on the 13th of November, welcoming the news of the deal. And it's now important that the co-chairs of the OSCE Minsk Group, France, the US and Russia, continue to work together to ensure a sustainable, peaceful solution that is based on the Minsk basic principles. And in the meantime, the UK is also playing its part in dealing with the humanitarian impact of the fighting.
Let's head to Warrington with Andy Carter. Andy Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon. Can I thank my honourable friend for her response and the work that she's doing? This is an issue raised by a number of constituents in Warrington South, concerned because in part this conflict isn't covered in UK media. Would the Minister agree with me that the critical action to ensure the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh comes to an end is continuing UK support for the OSCE Minsk Group and dialogue between Azerbaijanis and Armenians?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend makes a really important point about making sure that we seek and maintain a lasting peaceful settlement to this conflict. And now that the fighting has ended, he is absolutely right that it's critical that the members of the Minsk Group work together to deliver a lasting peaceful settlement. And the UK has consistently supported the work of the co-chairs of the Minsk Group to deliver this. And continued dialogue between Azerbaijan and Armenia is essential to prevent any further loss of life and to bring about a permanent negotiated end to this conflict.
We now come to Topicals, Paul Howell.
Speaker. Number one, please.
No mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the last oral questions, I opened the first ministerial meeting of the Global Media Freedom Coalition of 37 countries, which the UK co-chairs alongside Canada. I spoke to Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia to call for an urgent ceasefire in the Tigray region, and I worked with my Five Eyes counterparts to issue a joint statement expressing serious concern regarding China's imposition of new rules to disqualify legislators in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Secretary of State identify opportunities to pressure the Chinese government into ratifying the Convention on Forced Labour, the Abolition of Forced Labour Convention, and the Protocol of 2014 to the Forced Labour Convention? allowing the UK to be sure that supply chains being used by UK businesses and government are in no way supporting the Chinese government's persecution of the Uyghurs. And agree with me that if UK business can't get full assurance, then they should shorten and preferably onshore their supply chains back to UK PLC.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank my honourable friend? I certainly warmly welcome the spirit of his question, although I think we need to be realistic about what China is going to be willing to sign up to, and therefore for our part we work very closely with UK businesses. It's very important, a hallmark of global Britain, that our businesses conduct themselves with integrity. We were, of course, the first country to produce a national action plan on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. We were the first country with the Modern Slavery Act to ask businesses to report on their supply chains and how they could be affected. We're very proud of our international leadership in this area.
Shadow Minister Preet.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, our existing 0.7% aid commitment sends a strong signal that the UK is a reliable partner for long-term economic, social, environmental and educational advancement across the globe. And this is cheaper than fighting wars. Not my words, but those of the CBI and the former Chief of Defence Staff General Lord David Richards. Does the Secretary of State agree that rowing back on our promise to the world's poorest people would jeopardise our soft power status ahead of a year where the UK will host the G7 and COP26? And will he recommit to his manifesto pledge made exactly a year ago today to spend 0.7% of GNI on aid?
Secretary.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? ODA and our aid budget will remain at the absolute centre of the work we do as a force for good. Of course, I shall, I'm afraid, we'll have to wait for the spending review to hear what the Chancellor has to say on that.
Tom Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the aggressive language from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, that the West should beware of their eyes being poked and blinded, demonstrates that country's contempt for freedom and democracy? That the time is now for stringent actions, including targeted sanctions? And would he further agree that if the current sanctions regime does not allow for targeting of those responsible for happening in Hong Kong, will the government consider new regulations that would target those authority figures who are truly guilty and not innocent Hong Kongers?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank my honourable friend? I totally share his objective. And of course, with the Magnitsky sanctions, the key thing is to target those directly responsible. Of course, you require evidence. And we work very closely with all of our international partners in order to share our experience and compare notes in relation to that. Of course, the recent comments follow on from the solidarity that we as Five Eyes have shown alongside the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand in relation to human rights and in particular in Hong Kong. And it follows on from the wider caucus of 39 countries that back the UK in the UN Third Committee, not just on Hong Kong, but also on the issue of Xinjiang.
T4 withdrawn, so we'll go to Jack Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Christians, Muslims and others have been persecuted for their faith across India. May I ask my right honourable friend what the UK government is doing to ensure people have the freedom of religion and belief worldwide?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this. Protecting and promoting the freedom of religion or belief is an important part of our bilateral and our multilateral relationships, and we don't shy away from acting on our concerns. We continue to deliver the recommendations of the report by the Bishop of Truro, and as by way of update of the 22 recommendations, we've delivered fully 10, we've made good progress on another 7, and are on track to deliver all 22 by the time of the 3-year review mid-2022.
Let's head to Scotland with Douglas Chapman. Douglas Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was reported last week that the government are considering reducing our international aid spending from 0.7% to 0.5% of our GNI, despite this being a commitment enshrined in UK law and a firm Conservative manifesto promise. Will the Minister agree with me that the pandemic landscape has changed things in such a way that this spending is needed now more so probably than ever, and the FCDO must build up the resilience of vulnerable and developing countries to tackle the current and future pandemics? So I ask, is the 0.7% commitment written in stone?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? And he's right to point to the important work we do, both ODA related but also development. The Prime Minister hosted the Gavi Summit, working together with countries around the world to make sure there's an equitable access to a new vaccine. In relation to the 0.7% commitment and our future ODA spend, I'm afraid have to wait for the spending review tomorrow.
Chris Grayling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend is aware of my concern about the impact of the pandemic, the economic collapse it has caused in some of the world's most important conservation areas, and the resulting increase in many areas in poaching and the illegal wildlife trade. Could my right honourable friend reassure me that over the coming weeks and months he will target more of our aid budget while helping communities in those areas, protecting the wildlife and tackling the illegal trade that is damaging so much of our conservation?
Minister.
The full extent of COVID-19 on the illegal wildlife trade is not known, but he is right to raise this issue, and we know that it is a serious crime undertaken by organised criminal networks. We have contributed 250 million to the Global Environment Facility, which runs the world's biggest programme to tackle the illegal wildlife trade. He will understand at this point I'm not able to give full details of future ODA spending commitments.
Let's head to Stella Creasy in Walthamstow. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is the day for the elimination of violence against women internationally as declared by the United Nations. But a British citizen, Caitlin McNamara, has spoken publicly about being seriously sexually assaulted by Sheikh Nahyan, the United Arab Emirates Minister for Tolerance. Has the Foreign Secretary raised this case with his counterparts in the UAE and demanded action on this matter? Or has he not? Has this government looked at using sanctions, as we have with Maginski sanctions, given that this gentleman is based in the UK and has property here? What is this government doing in this case to show that it is not just words but deeds that matter when it comes to gender-based violence?
Minister.
The FCDO takes all reports of sexual assaults abroad extremely seriously. Miss McNamara had a deeply distressing experience in the UAE earlier this year. Consular officials from the embassy supported her when she reported the incident to them, and the FCDO consular staff are standing by to do everything they can to support Miss McNamara and her legal team.
Let's head to Lichfield with Michael Fabricant. Mikey Fab.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will know that we enjoy a very close security and other relationships with the United States of America, and this will indeed have been strengthened by the Prime Minister's announcement to increase defence spending and, of course, our membership with Five Eyes. But my right honourable friend will know that this morning the Dunn family lost their appeal against the Foreign Office regarding the recall of Anna Sakoulas to the United Kingdom to face trial for death through dangerous driving. I wonder whether my right honourable friend could make a statement regarding this and whether he thinks that with the change of administration, she might now be able to come back to the United Kingdom.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this case? He's right to say the High Court has found that the Foreign Office behaved lawfully, properly, in good faith throughout. But I appreciate, as he will know, that that will be no solace to the family who are still very much grieving for the loss of their precious son. We've made it very clear we are on the side of the Dunn family. We've consistently called for Anne Sakoulas to return. We'll continue to do so, including, as he asked, in relation to the new administration. I also negotiated the change of the arrangements as they affect the Croughton base. So a case like this, an injustice like this, cannot happen again in the future. And in relation to the claim that the family are bringing in the US, I've made clear that we are willing to support it in various ways.
In terms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kenyan government pensions in respect of service often decades ago haven't been paid since early last year. A cross-party group with constituents affected have just written to the Minister for Africa about this. And will the Minister meet us to discuss what more can be done to ensure the payments do resume and that the arrears due are paid as well?
Secretary.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? I know he always raises this case and these issues very assiduously and conscientiously. He can, of course, I will make sure he can have a meeting with the African Minister to look at what further we can in the FCDO do.
David Simmons.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the government's commitment to fighting disease abroad, and I have personally seen the benefits which UK projects are bringing to parts of Africa affected by malaria. Does my right honourable friend agree that the £500 million investment by the UK in tackling malaria is a welcome step against disease both abroad and a benefit at home?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He's absolutely right. The UK is a founding member of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. Malaria deaths have halved since 2002. That is an incredible achievement, vital to bringing stability and hope to those countries affected.
Let's head up to Greater Manchester with Debbie Abrahams. Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the human rights abuses that Kashmiri people have faced over generations are unacceptable. The 2018 and 2019 United Nations Human Rights Report documented the scale of these abuses, and since August 2019, things have only got worse. Just last week, shelling between India and Pakistan, two nuclear powers across the line of control, saw at least 15 people killed. This follows on from escalating tensions between India and China in the Galwan Valley since the summer. Kashmiris feel they've been abandoned by the international community, including the UK. So what is the Foreign Secretary doing to contribute to an international coalition to support India and Pakistan in negotiations on de-escalating the immediate crisis? Will he commit to targeting development funding to support Kashmiris?
I thank the honourable lady for her question and her continued emphasis on this regard. This is, these are matters that have to be settled. That region of Kashmir have to be settled bilaterally between Pakistan and India. What I can say is that we do raise this issue at every opportunity with both authorities. I'm more than happy to ask the Minister for South Asia to meet with the honourable lady so she can get a deeper insight into the actions that the government is taking.
Okay. Sam Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister comment on the FCDO's activities promoting Wales in the world, particularly around the time of St David's Day each year, as well as other Wales-focused activities it conducts in its embassies and diplomatic missions globally?
Can I thank my honourable friend? It's a really important part of the work we do, promoting all four corners of the United Kingdom. We do it in our posts through celebration of St David's Day, as well as other national festivals. We do it all around the world. And through the Great Challenge Fund, the FCDO promotes Welsh businesses and Welsh culture. In the last financial year, he may be interested to know we supported 40 projects promoting the devolved nations, including 14 in Wales. And with DIT, we helped attract 62 foreign direct investment projects in creating 2,736 new jobs, which I think just demonstrates the value to the people of Wales of the United Kingdom government, including in its foreign policy.
14 withdrawn, Robert Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that Iran are building an underground nuclear facility and that their enriched uranium stockpiles are now more than 12 times the limit set out in the 2015 nuclear deal. Given these facts, can ministers confirm to the House that in the event of continued non-compliance by the Iranian regime, the UK is prepared to consider sanctions?
Seriously.
Can I thank my honourable friend? I was in fact in Berlin yesterday for an E3 meeting with my French and German counterparts on exactly this issue and how we are taking forward accountability within the scope of the JCPOA. I can tell him that there are over 200 EU sanctions listed in place against Iran, and with our E3 partners we are continuing the JCPOA to maintain and constrain Iran's nuclear programme as best we can, and of course we are looking to re-engage with the new US administration to see how we can strengthen it even further.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Europe is aware that my 18-year-old constituent Tom Channon tragically died at the Eden Rock complex in Mallorca in July 2018. This followed a similar death of Tom Hughes just weeks earlier. I believe that there is a strong criminal case to be pursued for prosecution for negligence, and I wrote to the President of the Provincial Court on the 10th of July this year, for which I have pursued persistently, to which I still haven't received a reply. COVID will have played a part, But does the Minister agree that waiting 5 months after a death of two 18-year-olds 2 years earlier is wholly unacceptable?
Minister Raab.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this case. Deaths abroad of our constituents are always tragic. Our consular staff at Post have spoken with the President of the Provincial Court in Parma, and we've asked him for a response to my right honourable friend's letter. And he's right to point out there are some enormous workloads as a result of COVID pandemic, but the President has assured us that he will respond to the letter in due course, and we'll continue to push on behalf of my right honourable friend and his constituents.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. Given the Rajapaksa government in Sri Lanka has effectively withdrawn from the commitments that country made at the UN Human Rights Council, can we count on the Foreign Secretary to show the leadership that we need in order to secure a new UN resolution to ensure both prosecution of historic war crimes and accountability for previous human rights abuses, but also effective challenge of the present government for ongoing human rights abuses?
Minister.
The honourable member is right to raise this. I applaud his work with the APPG also alongside other colleagues. We will work closely with our international partners and the HRC on how best to take forward this important issue. The Minister responsible for Sri Lanka, Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, has raised a number of these concerns, including the harassment of civil society and militarisation of civilian functions, when he spoke with the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister on the 5th of November. We've been clear in our support for the UN HRC framework, both in our discussions with the government of Sri Lanka and to the UN HRC in February, June and September.
Ian Duncan-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, that he has witnessed the most appalling attacks and bullying by the dictatorial Chinese government against Australia, including sanctions just because they asked for an independent inquiry onto the COVID issue. We stand together, our oldest friend and ally. Will he please now say to the world and publicly condemn the actions of China and support Australia in this very difficult time?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank my right honourable friend? We stand absolutely shoulder to shoulder with Australia. Had exchanges with Maurice Payne, the Australian Foreign Minister, over the weekend, and as we've shown, not just on the issue he mentioned, but on Hong Kong, the Five Eyes Alliance will always stand shoulder to shoulder to make sure we protect our key interests, protect our values, and also show the solidarity that I think he expects and requires.
In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order. Are you ready? Colin, are you okay? Order! I'm going to ask the question on behalf of Clive Betts, who's got the urgent question, and then I will go up to Clive Betts. Minister, to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate the honourable gentleman, the member and chair of the select